Alors bonsoir tout le monde, bienvenue à cette
Good evening,
réunion
everyone, and welcome
municipale,
to this municipal
et
meeting.
réunion d'information.
It's an
C'est
information
la réunion
meeting.
du
It's
troisième mardi,
the
toujours
meeting
réunion
of the
d'information
third Tuesday of the month. It's always an
pour
information meeting
différentes organisations avec qui
to hear from different
on a affaire ou
organizations
des demandes
that
de
we deal
présentation qui ont
with
été
or
reçues au cours des
people who
dernières
have
semaines.
requested to make a
Alors,
presentation.
sans plus tarder,
So without any
ceci
further
étant dit, on
ado,
dit qu'il y a
I'm
quand même
told that
plusieurs personnes avec qui on va
we
communiquer.
have a number
Je
of
vous
people
demanderai de vous
here
identifier lorsque vous aurez le droit de parole.
that are going to take the
Et
floor. I would ask you to identify
essentiellement
yourself
pour
when you do so.
la première
And
présentation
so
sur les
for
taxes
the
municipales,
first
on a
presentation on
Jean-François
municipal taxes, we'll
Barry
be hearing from
et
Jean-François
Céline
Barry and
Finn qui vont nous
Céline
adresser, si
Finn,
je comprends bien.
if I understand correctly.
Alors bonsoir, bienvenue.
Good evening and welcome.
Oui, OK, c'est bon.
Good evening.
Jean-François Barry, résident de Dieppe depuis
Jean-François Barry, I've been living in
vient du
Dieppe
Québec
since
au Canada, au
2001,
Centre de
but
Bouctouche
originally
en
from
Estrie.
Quebec, but there's a woman from Bouctouche who brought me here.
Je vais juste mettre en contexte pourquoi
I'd
je
just
suis
like
ici.
to
C'est pas
explain the
nécessairement pour moi, mais
context,
pour
explain why I'm here. It's not so much for
en fait, je suis
myself.
coupable de pas
Well, as
venir
a
dans
matter of
les
fact,
réunions de la ville, puis
I'm
pas
guilty of not
en
coming
fait,
to city
je sais pas
meetings.
si d'habitude il y a plus de monde que ça,
And
mais
I don't know if usually there are more
le
people than
premier à pas
today, but
m'impliquer dans ma ville,
I
à
am
pas
the
être
first
dans ma
person to
ville,
admit
puis à
that
faire
I'm
comme
not
tout le
really
monde, puis écouter
involved in my
jaser
city,
dans notre salon.
and I do like
Puis comme
everybody, we talk and
tout
discuss in our living rooms.
le
But
coût de la vie augmente,
the cost
dont
of
les taxes.
living,
Puis
everything has
suite à
gone
ça,
up, including our
il
taxes.
y a plusieurs personnes qui nous manifestaient,
And
qui
so
disaient, ah,
another
mais
another
les taxes
number of
sont
people were
différentes,
telling us, oh,
qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire?
taxes are so
En fait,
high now, so
ça qu'on
what can
voulait
we do?
discuter un petit peu ce soir,
And
ben
this
là,
is what we
avec
wanted to
l'augmentation
discuss
du
with
coût de la
you
vie,
this evening.
et la réforme des
The
taxes municipales qui s'en
cost
vient,
of living has
qu'est-ce
gone
qu'on
up,
peut faire?
and
Il y a
the municipal reform is underway
on
or
réalise
has
que le
taken
coût de la
place.
vie à
And
Dieppe
we
a augmenté
realize
beaucoup.
that
Moi,
the
depuis
cost of
2001,
living in
honnêtement, ça
Dieppe
a
has
augmenté
really
beaucoup.
gone up
Puis
since
pour voir
2001.
si on a on
And
est juste comme tout seul dans notre salon à
uh,
penser ça ou voir. On a fait un petit
we
sondage
were
à
wondering if we were the only ones who
quasiment
thought that as we were sitting and
de voir
discussing this in our living
y
rooms.
a-t-il
But
moyen
so we did
pour
a quick
le monde
poll,
en général de réduire
and
les taxes
it's a
pour
little
régler leur coût
concerning
de
to
vie.
see that for most people,
Donc, il y a eu
um,
la
they
réforme du
would like to
gouvernement
reduce the
flocal,
taxes
puis
or lower the cost of living. So
c'est pour
there
moi
was
le temps
the
que
reform of
la ville
local
de Dieppe pourrait
governance.
être
And for me, I think it's time that the
frontière,
city
puis
of Dieppe
être de l'avant,
could
puis
be a
voir
leader, really
essayer de
be
réformer en
ahead
même
of the
temps
pack and
les
try
taxes
and
municipales.
reform
Parce que
municipal
le système de
taxes
taxes dépend de deux
because
facteurs
the
indépendants
tax
que vous savez probablement. Il y a
bill
Service
depends
Nouveau-Brunswick
on
qui fait
two
l'évaluation foncière,
things. There's
puis
Service New-Brunswick that
l'évaluation foncière. Eux autres
does
essaient
the
de se rapprocher
assessment,
du prix de
the
vente. Puis
property
dernièrement,
assessment,
ils se sont mis
and
beaucoup de l'avant pour se rapprocher du prix de vente.
in
Si vous regardez vos propres
the municipal
maisons,
assessment is getting
oui,
closer
c'est
to
pas mal
actually to the
proche. Il y a
market
beaucoup de
price. Yeah, it's
variations
much
d'une
closer than
maison
it
à
used
l'autre.
to be.
Puis
There's still a lot of
on
variation from
devrait
one
voir
house
que
to the
si vous
next,
vendez
but
votre maison
if you
à
sell your
400 000
house
votre
for
évaluation municipale va être
$400,000, let's
400 000
say, your
C'est ça que Service
municipal
Nouveau-Brunswick veut
assessment should
arriver à
be
faire. Après
$400,000,
ça,
and
il y a
that's what
les villes.
SNB
Ils
is
ont tout
trying
droit,
to
ils
get
ont un
to.
besoin d'argent
And
parce que
then there
l'argent
are
vient
cities
des
that are
taxes
saying, well, we need
municipales.
money because
Donc, on
their
va
money comes
décider
from municipal
combien
taxes.
on va
So
charger.
they are going to
Puis,
decide
on
how
va
much
avoir
they're going to
un budget.
charge,
Puis, c'est comme ça qu'on
and they
va
develop their budget based on that.
Avant ça, historiquement,
In the past,
les
historically,
évaluations municipales étaient
municipal
sous-évaluées. Les
assessments were
maisons étaient évaluées à
undervalued.
200 000
Houses were
puis ils vendaient
undervalued.
400
Let's
000
say they were
Puis
assessed
les
at
appartements
$200,000, but they
de
would
base étaient
be
plus hauts. Ils étaient
they'd
sur
sell for
200 000 puis sur
400,000. So
400
the
000
the tax
Puis pour
rate,
même
well, the
justifier
tax bill
ça,
was based on
vous avez vraiment
$200,000
reçu,
rather than the
vous autres aussi,
400,000.
dans votre compte de
So,
taxes,
and that's probably the
du
same in
papier,
your
puis ça,
tax
c'est
bill.
avec
You
la
get a
fin que
little
j'ai fait
piece
ça,
of paper,
qui
and this
dit
I
que le
got
taux
it
de
this year
réduction,
after I
parce que
had prepared
vous
this
aviez à l'échelle
presentation, but it
locale,
said
donc ça
that
c'est vous,
the tax rate
puis
is
il faut adresser
determined
vos
at the
questions aux
local level.
municipalités,
That's
puis
you,
pas
and so you have to ask your
qui fait
questions to the
les autres taxes.
municipalities. It's not
Puis on
Service
reçu
New
le Dieppe
Brunswick that
Mag
determines
qui
the
dit,
tax rate.
hey,
And then we
vous
received the
trouvez que
Dieppe
votre
Mag that says,
bill de taxes a
okay, well, you
augmenté,
find your tax bill.
ben nous,
Did
on a
you find
réduit
that it
nos
goes up?
taxes, mais ça
Well, we
continue à venir plus
reduced our
cher.
tax rate, but
Donc,
it's
en fait,
still higher.
il y a quelqu'un à
So
quelque part,
somebody
c'est
somewhere
l'autorité
along the
foncière qui
way,
travaille à dire
it's
c'est
like
quoi les
is
règlements.
throwing the ball into
Puis
the
le
other
but
court,
étant
saying
que
it's not us, it's
le
them,
coût
and
plus
back and
cher.
forth.
Donc,
So in
c'est
the
un
end
petit
of
peu
the
ça
day,
qu'ils ont dit, OK, à qui il faut
the
parler?
bill is
C'est pas
higher.
Service
So
Nouveau-Brunswick qui va
who do we
régler.
need to talk to? Is it
C'est
to
probablement
Service New
partout
Brunswick?
dans
Is
le
it to the
Nouveau-Brunswick,
city?
mais
It's
comme on est
probably
Dieppe,
everywhere
les
in New
gens vont pas
Brunswick,
venir
but
voir
since
ici.
we live in Dieppe, we're going to
Donc,
say we're going to come see.
les chiffres,
Yeah.
c'est des chiffres qui ont été
So
publiés
here you see
en
some
ligne.
figures. They were
Puis, je veux pas
published online,
dire que les chiffres sont bons ou pas
and
bons.
I'm not trying to say that they're correct or not, or accurate or not, but it's just to, and the treasurer probably has the better figures than mine, but you'll notice that the tax rate, the base tax rate has gone up a lot between 2020 and 2023, and we didn't go any further than that. But there's almost $1 billion more as a base tax rate. Now, the tax rate, as you could read in Dieppe, has come down by the city of Dieppe. They reduced it. It went from 1.62 mill rate to 1.43. But the reduction in the tax rate has not followed the increase of the value of the homes, and that's why we end up paying more. And I'm going to save time here, so I don't want to go into all of the details. And I don't know if Moncton and Dieppe get together on this. Their tax rate is almost the same, so I don't know if there's a regional committee that determines the tax rate or how it works, but they're almost the same rate. But in Bathurst, if you look at Bathurst, the tax rate is much higher. So if somebody might think, oh, well, it's going to cost more to live in Bathurst, but no, the house is assessed much less. So that's the difference between the two. And I don't want to get involved in the details here, but I didn't realize that. I didn't know this because I really didn't follow the city meetings or the committee meetings, but I do read Yet Mag. But the city does have surpluses, which is great. But when we planned this meeting, Mr. Thibodeau had told us that it had gone down. They reduced their debt rate to 7%, which is excellent. That's excellent. You went from 21 to 7%. That's wonderful. It's really, really good. And I'm sorry if this is in English. It was prepared by an Anglophone, but so I left it in English, seeing as we're a bilingual city. But in summary, what we need to remember is that the base rate went up by 40%. So in theory, the number of people who paid taxes, or we receive the communications that say the construction rate has gone up. We've gone up. The number of building permits has gone up year over year. It keeps going up, and that's why the base rate has gone up. So if it's gone up by a lot, then the assessments have gone up a lot by 34% as well. But the tax rate, went down by 12%. So if the assessment rate went up by 34%, but the tax rate went down by 12, at the end of the day, people are still going to pay 22% more than what they used to pay on their tax. And that's why their tax bill is higher, and not because it's one person's fault or one body's fault or another one. Now, and expenses have gone up by 22% here in the city. Everybody's expenses have gone up because of inflation, but this is much higher than inflation. So the city's expenses are going up much higher than the inflation rate. Why? I don't know, and I can't tell you why, but it's something you can wonder about. You have a city that's growing. I'm not familiar with the municipal cost, but is it because the city is growing that the expenses go up so much? Usually when you have more people, you have cost savings, you have an economy of scale. So I don't know, maybe it should go down some. But currently, the tax rate, in case you don't know, it depends on the value of the property on the one hand, but also on the new constructions. So the number of properties have gone up, and construction has gone up, so the base rate has gone up. And you can find this online. So that's just an example or two. We put two houses here. One, well, it's my house because I have access to the figures, but these are all figures that you can see online. You can see that from 2020, the house was assessed at 775,000 and change in 2021. The government said you can't increase it. And then in 2022, it did go up, and they put a cap of 10%. So that's what I put on the second line. So today in 2024, my house that was assessed at $1.2 million, but I'm going to pay a tax on 1 million because of that 10% cap. But the 10%, well, means it's still going to go up next year and the year after until I've reached that 1.2 million, unless they don't keep increasing it as well. So my tax rate, if I paid 2024, I'm going to pay $15,000 plus $900 for water and sewer, so $16,000 after taxes to stay in Dieppe, to live in Dieppe. Now, you might think, okay, well, my house is worth a lot more, so that's the figures it gives, but the principle is the same for everybody. If let's say you had a house that was worth $300,000 in 2020, that is worth $400,000 in 2024, 440,000, still has to pay $5,900 plus $900 for water and taxes, almost $7,000 to live in Dieppe. So I don't want to want to list all of the cities of Canada, but I know that in Montreal, a house that is equivalent to $1.2 million, for example, will pay $8,700 of taxes. So to live in Montreal, municipal taxes, because there's also school taxes and other taxes there, but the total be $8,700. So 8,700, 16,000. It's twice as expensive to live in Dieppe than in Montreal. And then we said, okay, well, are we the only ones who think that sitting around in our kitchen here? And if yes, well, okay, that's fine. That's what it is. But if not, so we wanted to find out. So we did a quick poll, and I don't want to go through all of the questions I asked, but we asked if you found on your tax bill, do you feel that the price should go down? And when you look at the answers here, when you hear that the tax rate is going down, people expect that their tax bill is going to go down. So 47% thought that their tax bill was going to go down. People don't understand that even that you went down from 1.63 to 1.42, but you didn't lower the taxes, you lowered the tax rate, but at the end of the day, it still cost more. Now, the 10%, just to understand what people understood about the 10% cap, a lot of people did understand this, but the majority of them are satisfied here in the Dieppe, and nobody's here to complain. Everybody likes Dieppe. There's a lot of things to do. There are a lot of free things, and a lot of things that people aren't aware of that are free or that are subsidized. I mean, there are the great trails here. I don't know if there are any as nice trails anywhere in Canada. They're uh, snow is removed. They're kept clean. My children go to the arenas that are subsidized by the city. So these all are costs that the people aren't familiar with, but they are a cost for the city. So the question then is to say, okay, well, this service is better than that, or which is better. And I mean, we're not here for that to say which service is worth more or better than the other. I just wanted to ask if people knew that that the city pays for certain services. Some people were aware, but others weren't. Other people were angry about it, and people say, yeah, I want some free services, but I can't tell you which one. I mean, this is, in the city, you have to please everybody. So even if my children are no longer in school, I still have to pay for schools. So, I have to pay for the ice rink, the ice oval, even if I don't skate. So the people don't always 52% of the people don't always use these free services. So when you have an assessment of each free service and the percentage of use by the population, I mean, do we have those figures in the city? I don't know because I don't come to the meetings, as I mentioned, but it might be interesting to know that we're putting money into these services, but are they being used fully? And is it worth it? Most people, then I wouldn't be surprised. Most people would think that their taxes are too high or much too high. And most people expect that because the building rate is going up and the population is going up, people would expect to pay the same rate, the same tax bill, or even lower tax bill. What is concerning, and we asked people, well, would you consider leaving because of the cost of living here? So out of 197 persons who responded to our survey, 27% said yes. They are considering moving away, and 27% said yes, they were planning on moving, and 31% they were considering it because it's too expensive to live here in Dieppe, and I find that very worrisome. And most of the time, these are not people who have only been here for a year or so. I mean, most people have been here for over 15 years, but people feel they pay too much in taxes. Now, the question, would you be ready to reduce the free services? It was just, if we tell the city you have to lower their revenues, well, they'll have to cut somewhere. Where are they going to cut? Are people ready to see cuts in certain services? Probably 72% are ready. And this was just, we determined the age group of the respondents just to see who it was. Now, I don't want to talk about each one of these questions, and it wasn't a professional survey, but it was representative. 200 people answered in very little time. And so it raises a lot of points. It points to the fact that there's dissatisfaction, a lack of satisfaction by the population, and perhaps we should investigate that and see what's happening there. And it was very
worrying
worrying also to see that a number of people are thinking of moving away from Dieppe. And the question that we asked, or that we didn't ask, that perhaps we should, is would you consider moving to a smaller house and to pay, to pay lower taxes, or even leave Dieppe and just go into Memramcook or elsewhere to pay less? But so these are people who between 45 and 54 years old, 42% of the time, between um, 20, 21% were 55 to 64. So it's not people who are thinking of going into a care home right away. Theoretically, these are people who are going to stay a lot longer. Now, 92% of the people feel that they pay too much tax. 95% feel that they expect their tax bill to decrease as the city grows. 58% are thinking of moving away, and 72% of people are prepared to see a reduction in their services in order to lower their taxes. So the objective, the reason we're here, and perhaps it already exists, and as I said, I don't come to committee meetings, perhaps it's already been done, but when you determine your budget, perhaps all of this is taken into consideration, that you shouldn't raise taxes, perhaps nobody's raised this with you, but sometimes you develop a budget, but oops, it's going up, it's going up, it's going what, but and then you start receiving too much money, so you have to find new expenses to spend it on, and you don't without even really asking questions. And if you spend it, it's the money of all the taxpayers that's being spent, but then everybody is taken it has to pay their taxes, their NB power rates, food that has gone up, everything's gone up. So we should be more responsible here at the city of Dieppe. And we get the impression that we should at least limit the expenses to the cost of living increase rather than raising it more than the cost of living increase. And even if we only raise it to the cost of living increase, well, then the increase in the tax base, well, that has the budget increase anyhow. Just the fact that because we have a greater number of construction of buildings and a greater number of people, that makes the budget go up. So the budget is going to go up anyhow. So there shouldn't be a reason that for allowing the budget of the city to go higher than the inflation rate. Otherwise, we could cover the inflation by the increase of the tax base. And I think it would be time for the city of Dieppe to take a position as a leader in terms of municipal taxes and to determine where you're going to get the money. Is it going to continue in the same way? And perhaps it would work with Service New-Brunswick in order to perhaps come and say, well, no, it's not you, it's me. It's not you, it's me. So stop saying it's not my fault, it's their fault. And the other guy says, no, it's not my fault, it's theirs. Because everybody who has opposed their assessment knows as soon as they realize that the house next door sold for the price of their assessment, well, that's what their assessment goes up. It's next door. The house sold for $400,000. Well, your house all of a sudden is going to be worth $400,000 because you're in the same neighborhood right next door. So in theory, SNB should put yours at $400,000. Well, this is probably not the city's responsibility, but should we not perhaps determine if the tax rate should be based on square footage rather than assessment? I mean, we could look at all sorts of things. For example, on the same street, sometimes even in the same neighborhood, they're all semi-detached homes, the same number of square feet, the same house, the same neighborhood, same street, but sometimes there's a difference of $100,000, $200,000 from one house to the other. So sometimes it depends, on who you know, or just the luck of the draw, but that you pay a little less. But until you hadn't finished your basement, but now you ask for a building permit to do your before, and then they come and do your assessment, but at the end of the day, your taxes are still lower than your neighbors. So it's frustrating when you look at SNB and you will start asking, well, why the neighbor's house is exactly the same as mine, and they pay $1,000, $1,200, $1,300 less than me, but we receive the same services. So I don't know what the answer is, but we need a better tax rate. And now, should we consider the amounts paid? Well, living in Dieppe, is it worth 1,600, $16,000 a year? Is there a maximum possible? I mean, it, perhaps we received some comments. We can give them to you, but everybody said it's more expensive to live here than in Ottawa, in Montreal, in Toronto. It's more expensive than a number of other places. And no, I don't want to go live in Montreal, but maybe I would go back to Quebec. I don't know, but I'm happy here in New Brunswick. But when I retire, if I want to stay here, if I don't want to have to move, when I retire, well, if it doesn't change, I'm going to be paying $20,000 a year in taxes, or $20,000 after tax dollars. So that, I have to receive $40,000 just to pay the taxes in order to stay in the same house if I don't sell, if I don't. So when I get to retirement, for $40,000, when I'm not earning money anymore, if I stay 20 years during my retirement, that's $800,000. So that's going to be an expensive retirement. And should we, as we mentioned, should we limit variations between neighbors? Well, that's a discussion that perhaps that the city should have, or the city should say, SNB should tell SNB there's a problem with the tax rate. We should sit down together, not only just Dieppe, I mean, it's not just Dieppe, but we came here because we live in Dieppe, but the cities should sit down with SNB and say, okay, listen, there's a problem here. Let's stop playing cat and mouse and let's decide how we're going to deal with the taxes and can we make it more equal for everybody. Out west, and this doesn't depend on SNB, of course, but out west, there are a number of cities that develop their budgets, and if they have a surplus, because Dieppe has a surplus, which is a great thing, but when they have a surplus at the end of the year, because it's taxpayer money, they say, okay, we have a surplus, and this is worth so many credits, so many cents in your assessment, so it's put as a credit on the following year's assessment. So that could be something to look at. And so if you have a surplus, if you make a surplus with the taxpayer money, you give it back to the taxpayers. It doesn't cost anything because you don't give it cash. You just put it in the bank and give it as a credit the following year. Are there better possibilities? Perhaps. Are there committees that exist? As I said, I don't know, but there should be one perhaps. And we should, avoid people saying, oh, Dieppe is far too expensive. I'm not going to stay here. I don't want to live here. Especially, I mean, you've already identified a number of problems with all the construction that we're going to see in Dieppe. There's going to be a lot of traffic. And if there's a lot more traffic, people are going to say, well, it's going to cost me, it's costing me too much. Plus, I'm going to be caught in traffic continually. People are going to leave. And we don't want people to leave Dieppe. So, and we're not here to say, hey, we'll start cutting all of the free services. That's not the point. And we're not here to debate which free services are better than which one than another. And should we really get this really nice Dieppe mag on paper or just an email instead? I don't know, to save money. I don't know. But should there be a committee that looks at the different expenses to see if they can cut expenses to save money for the taxpayers? Probably. Does it already exist? I don't know. But perhaps it's something you can look at. But I think the city should find out, because this was just a very quick survey. It doesn't come from the city. So as I said, a number of people probably might not have wanted to answer, but if the city were to organize a survey, maybe they'd get some surprising answers, and at least you'd have a good idea to what your taxpayers feel, and then you'd be able to decide what to do, and then you could really decide, okay, well, I mean, and not say, oh, well, Service New Brunswick decides. No, you try and find a solution so that it's more fair for everybody and so that it is not that expensive to live in Dieppe. I don't know if you have any questions. I don't know if we can take questions. Yeah, before we move on to questions, I just wanted to clarify a couple of points. I want to specify that, of course, the tax bills that we've received, that we just received, do include two elements, as you already mentioned. There's the tax rate and the assessment, the property assessment. The tax rate, we've already talked about it. That is the responsibility of the municipality, but the assessment, I know you don't want to hear this, but the assessment is completely out of our hand. It's the province. In spite of the fact that the province has did take the time to send it to everybody, to the province, and to point the finger on the municipalities because the assessments have gone up. So I know that's preaching for your own choir, and it depends which choir you sing it with, but and I don't want to get into the politics of it, but that is the reality. And it's time for us to review the whole system. I agree. But what we can ask for that, and we will certainly do so. We will ask for it because I mean, what's who gets hit with it? Well, it's us. Yeah, but you can't decide the assessment. We agree, but we're not going to discuss that. But once you have the tax rate, the base rate, and yes, you did bring it down over the years, and that's great. But there's a way of talking about the calculation and tell people, okay, we reduced your tax rate, not your taxes. We reduced your tax rate, but if SNB has to tell you, and I don't know how that works, but I know it doesn't come out of the middle of nowhere, but if the SNB says, okay, the assessments have gone up by 20% or 30% or 10%, and let's say it's 10%, and you reduce your tax rate by 2%, well, it means the tax has gone up by 8%. So if you say it's going up by 10%, ideally you would reduce it by 10%. And so it would come out equal, including plus the extra new people arriving. Well, unfortunately, I don't think nothing can be done this year. No, I'm not saying for this year. I'm just saying, but we understand your message received, and that's why we will review our budgetary process for 2025 and our financial plan in order to try and reduce this tax burden. We tried through cuts, but this was a first year, not for cuts for us, but with this new system that was put into place, and so we see the result. So we hear you. More details will be sent, and as we always say, we invite people to come see us, but people don't. So as a matter of fact, I would invite you to remain here to hear what others have to say, because there's all sorts of projects that are always on the table that are under discussion with the community and the council. And so it'll give you some ideas, an idea in what you see on the screen. The people who are on Zoom, please feel free to stay, and you'll find out what's going on in the community, and you'll see the new requests being made to council. So for further details, then we will communicate with people to talk about it. We do have a job to do. There is a job to be done. We recognize that. And in closing, I know it was mentioned that we had a surplus of $7.2 million, $17.2 million in 2022. That was a paper surplus only, based on the type of accounting that using the public sector accounting system. So it's a surplus that exists only on paper. And in reality, the 2022 surplus, according to the regular accounting method, would be $660,000 for the operating fund of the municipality. So it's a little complicated. We invite you to come for the presentation of our financial statements on April 22nd. You're welcome to ask all of the tax questions you want, and I'm sure you will get the answers you need.
I just maybe want to, I just want to summarize what's being said in the Tim Hortons and at the Cora restaurant. I'm a retired person. So I'm from Saint-Anselme, that's where I was raised, and I grew up here, and I still live here. But my situation you know, and I think I represent what Jean-François was talking about. You know, I'm in a city house. I bought it 1 year after my neighbor did. Oh, okay. Could you talk to the microphone? This is being recorded, so we want to be able to hear you. Okay, so you know, I live in a city house, and you know, there are two of us, and every year I pay $1,000 more for the same number of the same surface area as my neighbor, $1,000 more in taxes per year. So something's not working there in the system. Yeah. No, I agree. And I'll give you an example. On Chartersville Street, where I live, we're challenging, you know, we automatically challenge our assessment every year, and more often than not, they will back off. But and that's just, you know, one particular case. Well, you know, but all of my neighbors, you know, we've all seen our taxes gone up, and so they sold their houses because houses sell leases, but the value of houses have doubled. So for me to be able to benefit from this, I have to sell my house. Otherwise, I'm paying more, and my taxes have doubled. I've been there for 4.5 years, and my taxes have doubled. I don't have any more services than I did before, but my quality of life, and it's unfortunate, but my quality of life is diminished because, you know, I get stuck in traffic. They've cut trees everywhere in the area, and I'm sure you've heard this. There's noise, there is light pollution, there's heat from the pavement, and I'm worried about this. I wouldn't be bothered to pay more taxes to support our green spaces, because that's what people come for in Dieppe, and that's not what's happening. But you know, in front of me, I'm on Keith Street. There are going to be 8 apartment blocks. I don't know where those cars are going to go. I won't be able to get out of my house. Happily, I'm retired, but how am I going to get out of my driveway? So now we're thinking of people. We're thinking like it's to the point now where we're thinking like people living in Montreal. So like Jean-François said, so first of all, does Dieppe really need to raise taxes? Do we really need that money or not? So that, you know that. Secondly, should we be, should our assessments be based on luxury items, or just for our spirits? And you know, I think what we have in our house, that should be up to us, but I'm not an expert in that. But so those are questions we're asking, and I'm happy that Jean-François took the initiative to speak to you. But I think as a city, we can do better. And yeah, a lot of people are starting to think of leaving. Even I'm thinking of leaving, because I'm not like it was. It's not like it was before. You know, this is a city that I chose to live in, but now I'm thinking, should I go or not? All right. Well, again, I encourage everyone, you know, listening, and let everyone here to participate. You know, we're happy to give voice to give the floor to residents, because it helps us to go further. And a great example of that is, you know, this evening you'll hear a number of presentations. And now I understand if you have to leave, but you know, we have to stay here, but you're welcome to stay. But it'll give you a kind of a taste of the things that are brought before City Council at these meetings. These are informational sessions, and the point, or the goal, is to present things to the municipality, and then of course we have choices to make. You know, we disappoint some people, we make progress in other areas. So just in closing, for me, you know, I've never met a neighbor or a resident who said, oh, I'm happy to pay taxes. Well, some people are, but it's the amount of taxes. Yeah. Inaudible comment. Yeah, but to have well, come and participate. If you want more control over the process, come and participate. We'll be happy to welcome you. All right. Are there any questions or comments from councillors? No? All right. Well, thank you for your presentation. Again, we encourage you, of course, to come and hear the financial results, the official results that will be presented. So the results for the municipality, and that'll be presented by our Director of Finance. And so that's April 26th and 22nd rather. It's not far. All right. Hello. My name is Jonathan Saint-Pierre. I am the president of the Dieppe Cycling Center, and I'm joined by my business partner here. And we're here to just talk to you about the center. We are a nonprofit organization. Sorry, I've got it. So we're a nonprofit organization, and we're in Rotary Park. This park is a great asset for the city, and it's great for us. So our goal is to connect the cycling community and the city, and to provide activities in the park, and also to promote cycling, health, and sustainability. We could talk about public transit as well, but that's not really our focus. So we were created in 2001. We used to be called Centre Atlantique National, so the Atlantic National Center or something like that. And our specialty at that time was to provide coaching. We had coaching levels, but now everything is done through Cycling Canada. So we lost that part of the work that we did. A few years ago, we decided to continue or to transition rather. And so we offer cycling courses for young people, for provincial teams here in Dieppe. And now we organize Canadian races as well.
Qu'est-ce que je voulais dire là?
Okay, I'm not sure what I tended to say with this slide, but so statistics. Let's just say we have a number of programs. So every year we offer a program called Hop On or Sprocket. So we follow Cycling Canada in those activities. We have 120 youth who participate in our programs, and for a fee. So compared to hockey and other sports, bikes don't cost a lot. That's my opinion, of course, but so you pay $100 for a course, and you don't need to travel to do, to go to tournaments at different cities. So it's relatively inexpensive. And you can also use bikes to travel around and to get around the city. We have partnerships with bike shops. So all our local bike shops, not just in Dieppe, but in the entire region, companies and sponsors. So that's an interesting aspect of what we do. Now, I mentioned this earlier, our Hop On, it was called Sprocket before. I think you might have seen that already, but we also have a group that works with trails, and we're lucky in Dieppe and in the Greater Moncton area. We have, over 60 kilometers of trails, cycling trails that we can use. So one of the things that we do, one of the activities that we do, is to show young people how to use those trails, how to travel throughout the city. And then we organize courses in the spring at the Rotary Park every Tuesday evening. So we have we have a course for adults and for young people. And, everybody's invited. We also we also organize community events. Now, what's it called again? What do you call that ride? Okay, the Vélo Tour. So we do activities at the Rotary Park as well. We organize the Canada Cup, and that's a national and international race. I don't know, do you want to add something, or is there something that I haven't mentioned? Well, we also have the TMX program as well. So there's TMX races, and in the Rotary Park, there's a lot of people there that are there during using the BMX trail. So, and we're looking to add other regular rides from time to time as well to benefit from this beautiful park that we have at Rotary Park. Okay, oh, that made me think of something else. So people might think that all the trails in Rotary Park are built by the city, but that's not necessarily true. We help build those trails. So what I usually say is that if you want something, get involved, and the city will support us. So thank you. Without the help from city staff, our trails would not be of the international caliber that they are. And sometimes we do school activities in schools. We help them organize races. We promote cycling as well. So same thing, how to use the trails, how to use and the more we use active transportation, the less people will use cars, for example. And so when we have 120 young people gather together in an afternoon, we have other people help us. So there are opportunities for volunteers, for anybody who with knowledge of bikes, and even if you don't have knowledge, you can still volunteer with us. All right, here's so again, volunteer opportunities. I've mentioned this already. Ways to support the cycling center. We often have partnerships with groups that will be able to help us. So one of those groups was Le Barbu. People will go out for a ride and then they come back and have a drink, and then kids can go and play in the splash park. So it's perfect. We have a website as well. So you can follow us on, on Facebook. Sometimes our Facebook page has things on it. The Hop On course will be live in April, and we accept up to 120 youth. And out of that 120, normally we sell out our program, but so normally we sell out in 15 minutes. So during the pandemic, we had developed a protocol for activities, and we had 160 youth in 3 separate groups. And it was a challenge, but it's very difficult to offer programs for 300 young people. It takes a lot of resources. So 120 is our maximum. So you can follow us on social media at these different addresses. Do you have any questions for us? Any questions from councillors? Councillor Turgeon-Roy. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Now, in my mind, I thought that cycling Dieppe was only for mountain bikes, but to my great surprise, here I learned that you're doing all sorts of cycling activities. Well, in terms of cycle, okay, we do cyclocross, and that's a different type of bike, but we do that in the fall. And what we do with the young people is that we mentioned the number of routes. So if there's a school organizing an activity in their gym, we supply coaches to help them. So, all right, good. And I have maybe a last question, and this is maybe for the assisting, but we talked about Vélo Tour. Is that something that's, are you thinking of inviting them to our community or doing that activity here? Well, that's something that we'd like to do again. It's a very important event, but that's something that we'd like to see with the city. Maybe we could organize something on a Saturday or Sunday in June, and we could continue that. But with the pandemic, everything kind of fell apart. But we'd like to start that again. All right, thank you very much. All right, I think so. I think people have taken notes. People are getting organized already there for that event. So thank you very much for your presentation. Our next group is the needs of seniors. And I believe it's Richard Thériault who is going to be presenting that, if I'm not mistaken. All right, I'm with the New Focus, and we were mandated to do a feasibility study to spend the city's money to create a center for seniors. So the report was presented, and I'm here more to maybe talk about the steps that we took to develop our recommendations, and maybe to talk about what those recommendations are. Okay, I'm going to pull up all these lines here before I talk about them. So we're going to talk about the wish list. We had a committee, we had a few committees. So we worked with. So the part was kind of internal work. We wanted to see what people were needed, and then we did an external search stage. So we drew up a wish list, and with our external research, we looked at existing model, and in Quebec in particular, things are quite advanced. They have what they call a one-stop shop, if you will. And then we looked at so you mentioned the acronym MADA. What does it stand for? What does it stand for? We always use it, but we don't in French, but we don't know what it means. So it basically means senior-friendly municipalities. So SFM in English. Sorry, I seem to have a glitch in my presentation here. All right, there was a study that was done on seniors' health. The World Organization of Seniors' Health had conducted a study, and they had kind of identified things that are really important for seniors. So participation, social fabric, social inclusion, citizenship, participation, employment, and community support, among others. And then in the winter of 2022, 2023, the city had launched a project on that. So there was a market study that was done to look at what the needs are in Dieppe and what we'd be looking for. And then that was followed by our search for information. There was a guide that was developed, a public survey as well. We consulted with community leaders and organizations. And then we had filed an action plan at that time. And one of the things that came out was that, yes, this makes sense. We we needed to know what we needed more detail. So then in fall, winter 2023, 2024, we were mandated to conduct a feasibility study. Now, we worked with the committee on this. We did some research. There was a big NS&L study from the University of Moncton Aging Center. There was an aging well at home project at Kokang. We did interviews with community leaders and associations. We did more research on existing models, and we prepared financial models. All right, so in terms of rather than think of everything that we could do, we started thinking about like how would a center like this exist? What would we need to create a center? And then we said, once we know what we want, then we can take a look at the exterior. We can think of the budget envelope and what the costs might be. So the first session that we did with the work group is develop a list of activities. And so again, here the list is less important. What's important is what kind of space would be needed to organize those activities. So we organized the information into 5 sections. So we talked a walking club, yoga, line dancing, physical activities, and then there was social cultural activities. So board games, common interest group, talent evenings, intergenerational games, and then social games. And then services and resources. So we talked about a one-stop shop, tax assistant, private consultations, government partners could be located there, community services, elderly assistance. So the idea was really to have a place where you could go if you're a senior and you wanted to know, you wanted information on something, you could go there. And then health was another category. So we wanted to be able to refer seniors to available medical services and have presentations by health organizations. So health-related information, a matching service. And then under other, we had social, matching, fraud prevention, community gardens, and so forth. So it was basically a brainstorming exercise to saying, okay, it's not necessarily to say this is exactly what we're going to do, but we wanted to know kind of what activities we would be interested in offering. And then we started looking at possible sources of funding. So same thing again, we did a bit of brainstorming, how could we fund this center? So we talked about governments, federal, provincial, municipal. We talked about leasing revenue, so either long-term offices, the rental of rooms for activities, conferences, shows, dues, for example, or fees for activities, and then fundraising, bingos, 50-50 games, and arts and craft sales and bake sales. So again, we were trying to figure out how this would work. So in terms of sources of finance or funding, we talked about federal, provincial, municipal. When we presented to the bigger community, we said that we don't think that this project could be organized solely by the city. Governments can take the lead here, but most of the funding, most of the funding must come from the city of Dieppe. And then we did a search for existing models in Canada. So we looked at La Maison des Aînés de Lévis. There's the senior center in Saint-Léonard, le Rendez-vous des Aînés in Laval. And we kind of kept the last two. There's a lot more than that. And in the report, you know, the report contains a link so you can go see these other sites. But so the first one that we talked about was the CCAL, so the Community Center for Seniors in Longueuil. So this is a nonprofit organization working with the most vulnerable people aged 50 and over without excluding other seniors. Their aim is to maintain and improve the quality of life of the municipality seniors. They emphasize personal and collective empowerment of seniors. They value the potential of each individual, encourage their active participation in society while respecting their personal limit. And so their objectives really match what the committee was telling us based on the study that had been conducted. So bringing together and helping seniors by encouraging them to take personal responsibility for improving their living conditions, providing a warm, welcoming social environment that fosters a sense of belonging, offer services of all kinds based on identified needs and complementing what already exists, providing seniors with information, keeping seniors in their natural environment, and so forth. So it's more than just a place to go and get information. And we gave, you know, at that age, sometimes it can be difficult for people to find information that you need. So for example, my mother, she needed help for her house, and it's not always easy to know where to go. But having a center like that, where you can kind of refer, you can kind of direct people to the right services, that is helpful.
Aux discussions puis aux choses que nous on.
In Laval, it was still, it was like we were saying, it was a place to meet and belong, to embrace the solitude. For Laval residents aged 50 and over, it was all in a warm and welcoming atmosphere to improve their quality of life, their individual and collective conditions, and make the most of their potential, to help better integrate people in the community, to reduce isolation, to develop innovative projects to help all seniors. And now, I talked to the person who was responsible, who was in charge of the center in Laval. He invited us to visit it if we wanted to do so. So they have about 650 members in their center. It works really well. They've been in operation for 18 years now. They organize a lot of activities. It works really well. They're 18,000 square feet in size about. They grew very quickly, but it's not well set up. I mean, there's a floor, so it's not always convenient for the seniors, but do you have any questions so far, or should I go on? Yeah, please. We're not shy. If we do have questions, we'll ask. Oh, sorry, I said 15,000. No, it's 7,000 square feet. Guy Lemieux is the executive director. They've been in operation for over 15 years, 650 members. It's a two-story building, which is not really practical. They have an annual budget of $800,000. The province of Quebec funds it at 60%, but about 40% has to be self-financed. Now, they've developed this 40% over the years. They didn't start with 40%, but it was a part of what they were trying to do with this center. Now, financial, different scenarios. From the different information we received, we said, okay, what are three scenarios we could look at? It's in English, but you know, good, better, best. But what would the minimum that we could have that would do the job? Looking at what they have in Quebec, for example, we said, okay, let's look at rental space, one full-time staff person, one or two resource persons, and a community room that would hold 30 to 50 people with an average room and for 10 or 15 people, 2, 3 offices, a reception area, we'd need 2,500 square feet. And then the better model would be a greater number of employees, 2 full-time staff, 5 to 7 resource people. We think that the government could perhaps um, allow certain of their departments to come be there during the day. So there'd also be a community room for 50 to 100 people, 2 that would be could be divided, 2 average size rooms for 10 to 15 people, the reception area, and then 5 to 7 private offices, 3,500 square feet. And then the best scenario would be a rental space in the downtown area, 3 full-time employees, 5 to 7 resource persons, a community center again, and but it would be 5,000 square feet. Now, again, we just looked at different scenarios to see what it might look like. Now, we also looked at what an operating budget could look like. We were hesitant between the 200,000 or the 460,000. I mean, the 2 big expenses are the rent and the salaries. The others aren't major. We have 350,000 or 464,000 for the better and the best, but we looked at the price per square foot for rental space with expansion Dieppe. And then we looked at what the different positions could be. And then so we looked at the different opportunities that Dieppe could build or buildings that are planned, or if we could perhaps put a rent that would be at a lower price, for example. Now, in terms of the final report, what we propose, the concept is an integrated, multidimensional approach focused on speakers with a 5,000 square feet of space, multifunctional space. There could be a modular community space with dividers, meeting rooms that would be well equipped for meetings and workshops with the technology, private offices for staff and for external professionals. It has to be fully accessible and services with facilities for people with reduced mobility, the flexible, modern, and comfortable interior design with all the amenities, and then it would really be a multi-purpose center that would be suitable for a variety of activities. Now, funding, and these figures come from expansion Dieppe, but leasehold improvements, 750,000. It would be about $250,000 a square, $250 a square foot for leasehold improvements. So we set a budget of $300,000 for furniture and equipment, and so we legal and unexpected contingencies, 10%. So we thought if it would be 40% federal, 40% provincial funding, and 20% municipal for the project. This is what we'd like to see. The advantages of this project, well, it would be centralization of the services. It would be improve accessibility for people who are 55 and over. It would be a space, the multi-purpose center that would be used by the community, not just the seniors. It would be an economic stimulus. It would reinforce local identity. It could create jobs. It would be flexible and adaptable. It might be an incubator on research, somebody who wants to do research on aging in the province. They might look at the different projects. It could be an incubator for that kind of research, and it would be attractive for new residents, and it would be educational for health. Now, we came up with $386,000 budget for the first year. We had looked at the good, better, best columns, and we tried to come up with something that would be acceptable, that we could live with. And then we said, okay, what could be the sources of funding? What would it look like? We looked at the federal government. It could be, they could help with the rental space. They could help with financial support. And the departments that we should talk to would be employment and social development or public health agency. And provincial, same thing with the rental and financial support. We would look at social development or Department of Health. Municipal level, it would be an annual contribution and administrative support. It would be the recreation department and community development. And the activities, for me, these are the activities that could replace what the municipality does over the years, room rental, shows, fundraising, and we're going to need help in that, and we need volunteers, of course, to help with that. And here I gave an example of a budget. If you look at rental space paid by the federal or the province, different programs for employees, if there's different programs that we can benefit from to fund the jobs, or an employee from Dieppe that could be assigned to the center, that would help me. The financial support, it would be 125,000 each, and a rental rebate. So that gives me my basic operating budget here. And our observations, well, we've seen a 10.8% increase in the population age 50 and over between 2016 and 21, and the trend is going upward. For the 50 plus population, there we expect a steady growth in Dieppe senior population, a growing demand for health services adapted to seniors. And we need to improve accessibility and mobility for seniors. It's very important to have programs that will reduce social isolation, to adopt technologies in order to improve the independence and the security and safety of seniors, and this growing preference for home care and opportunities. And the government could see where the funding might come from, or to perhaps identify the needs and the funding possibilities. These are our recommendations. Well, thank you for your presentations. Are there any councillors who have questions? Councillor Godet. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation and for all this information. And just to add that I'm a senior myself, you can see it. Now, based on the survey that we did for the taxes, they said that 65% had been in the city for over 15 years, but 60% were between 45 and 60 years old. So 63% of citizens are coming up in age. So it gives you a good idea of what you're looking at. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship. Just a brief question. Currently, in Greater Dieppe, how do you calculate the number of seniors currently? Well, I don't have those figures with me, sorry. But it's possible to get those figures, yes. And my second question, because we talk about rental space or office space, have you ever considered sharing space? Perhaps you could have another organization that would share the space. You could develop a partnership. Yes. Yes. And that's why we were talking about rental income. And if it fits, yeah, if it fits, yeah, it's certainly feasible. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. And if you allow me to add something, the possibilities are many. So the report has been given to us, and as Richard mentioned, over the next 5 years, we're going to see if there's existing buildings that we can use an existing building, if this model would fit into an existing building, or is there a future building, perhaps a future project that it could go into? So these are the models we're going to look at now once the project has been tabled. I was listening to my colleague, Councillor Godet, who was saying that he feels like a senior too. Well, today I feel like a senior myself. Thank you, Councillor Leboutier. Well, at 50 years, I think we're all pretty well, almost all of us are 50 or over. I don't know what the definition is. It's 50 and more, 50 and over in Dieppe. So perhaps that's something we should review too. I have a couple of questions. the recommendation, these feasibility studies, what was the basic research? Yeah, there was a need, but was it to quantify? What were you looking for exactly? Well, we wanted to see what it could look like and to see what the structure could look like. And we had developed a list. We had a working group, and we developed a list. They had their wish list. So, for example, community kitchen, community garden. These are all things that weren't included in their final report because it doesn't work economically speaking, and those infrastructures, those facilities already exist in Dieppe. So we're trying to look at the wish list as identified and the list of necessary elements to develop, to validate what already exists and to see if it makes sense. So that's the approach we took. Yeah. What's the ultimate objective here, though, out of these three scenarios? Well, it started with a strategic plan of the focus areas. First of all, to identify a meeting place for seniors, a communication a plan, and we asked New Focus to go with what would we need in terms of square footage, what would we need in terms of flexibility. So now it's up to us to see if there's a way that we can include this in the different projects, different facilities that already exist or that will exist. But we're going to take all of these recommendations and all of the needs as identified and see what we can do within a center. Yeah, it's the concept of single window, you see. So the objective wasn't to assess what it might look like if we were to build a $5,000 square foot rather than pay the rent on that. But it was what might it look like and not how to get it started. Well, at one point there are buildings being constructed in the next 5 years. There are buildings being built, so we prefer this option of renting because you know, as the city, but maybe in the future it would be to build. But all of these options are open. But these are all things we saw it very quickly through the consultant that in the future, should we build something or should we use an existing facility, really one of our buildings? And so anyhow, that's what they looked at. There are costs associated. Could you use the microphone, please, because it's being recorded? Yeah, well, there are costs associated, whether we rent or we build. And Denis showed us that the city might have access to funding, infrastructure funding, for example, that might be worthwhile. It might be something that we could add to a building, to existing buildings. Okay, thank you, and that's great. And my last question, I think you've already partially answered. There, concretely, there is federal and provincial funding that targets this type of program of senior centers. Specifically, well, the next stage would be, well, we have to go and sit down with the different government levels to see that. The principle exists. I mean, it exists in other provinces. There is funding that exists, but it's one of the priorities put forth by the province to have people stay in their homes longer. And there's enormous cost savings compared to having people in care homes. So there's an incentive for the population if we keep our people home. So if it's an incentive to tell the province that there is a cost savings involved in this, but we have to have these conversations. Yes, I also think that we have a really committee. We have a great community here as a city, and we have to look at helping our citizens. I mean, we're not a leader in New Brunswick. I mean, you look at Quebec and elsewhere in the world for senior centers, some municipalities have, sometimes there's an 800 number for seniors, and but congratulations. It's really good that at least you're looking at this, you're addressing the issue in the long term. Thank you. Councillor Turgeon-Roy. Thank you. Amongst the recommendations for next steps, there's a new center, a new senior service center that's going to be opening in Dieppe through the Vitalité Health Network. Is that something that's going to be put forth, the possibility, or are you going to have consultations in order to avoid duplication? Yeah, we were already aware of that. That's why that at the beginning there was, a clinic. I mean, we removed the needs of a clinic because it's there, and we mentioned that we want to be able to direct people to the right place. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Jeannin. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation. It's something that we have to keep in mind looking to the future. I asked my question last time already, I think. It was on whether or not the committee had consulted the ethnocultural groups, multicultural groups in the region. Because our city is welcoming a greater number of immigrants. Young families arrive with their aging parents, perhaps, and they may have needs that are different than ours. So what you've identified, does that work for them as well? So I'm just wondering, did you have consultation to see if this would meet the needs of all residents, all seniors? Well, we didn't have consultations specifically with the immigrant group, but we met with different groups, the Red Cross, the Lions Club, they had a workshop. And so there were all sorts of different groups of that set, but specifically with the multicultural groups, no. Because I'm saying for knitting evenings or a card game evenings might not necessarily be what interests them most. And perhaps it might be something different. So I'm just wondering if it's something that can be evaluated at the same time to see if it meets everybody's needs. Well, we didn't look at card games rather than knitting clubs. We looked at the types of possibilities. So by looking at that, we looked at the different rooms that would be necessary. And when it comes time to develop the programming, and we have a person who will do that, well, the objective would be to see what we need from the population. But at the first, of course, we have to have the center first. Yeah, but perhaps the size of the room might be different depending on the needs, on the specific needs. But that was my thought process here. Are we assessing it based on this size of group, or, well, just to add here, and I mentioned it to the committee, when we prepared this, we finished when we finished, and I'm not shy about talking money with the mayors, and they know that. But if you need information before making your decision, that's what we do. That's our. So we will be finished when if you have any questions, I mean, we'll answer them. But if you need more information, then we'll find that information. Thank you. Councillor Lantin, thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation. Goes without saying that we still have a lot of work to do in terms of services offered to seniors in the municipality. It's a great project. I mean, it's no doubt in my mind. I'm just wondering, how do you situate the golden age clubs in this? Because it was mentioned that one of the first reasons was to develop a meeting space. So the golden age clubs play that role already, and they also offer certain services to their seniors. So I'm just wondering how they fit in. And does it mean that the seniors clubs no longer have a reason to be, or raison d'être, or is there a difference? Well, we met with the Dieppe, the Club d'Âge d'Or, the Dieppe Seniors Club, to discuss. Now, when we talk about social, that's they do social activities. The rest is not in their mandate. One of the big differences that would be open every day. It would be a service center. You know, you can go. You know it would be enter. Whereas the seniors club, the Golden Age Club, is a membership based. There are activities, but it's not open all the time. They have activities. They organize a dance or they organize a supper, but they have a kitchen. Well, and they have a wonderful kitchen at the Golden Age Club. So we don't need a kitchen because there's a great kitchen there. And it's not, we're not trying to compete with them. The other thing is that more and more the 50 years old and older don't feel a part of the Golden Age Club. So the Golden Age Club is going to have to reinvent itself because the today's younger seniors don't feel like they are a part of it. So it's not at all the same thing. Now, there are certain areas where we'll meet, but the objective is not to replace the Golden Age Club, but to complement them. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Godbout. Thank you. My question was similar. So perhaps you could go a little further. In the models that you presented, that you talked about Longueuil and Laval, you were talking about a membership of 650. So it's an organization, if I understand correctly, in that constant. These are not for profits, but membership based. Well, yeah, but they call them members, but they don't pay their membership. They pay for specific activities. 40% of their budget last year. Last year, their budget was $800,000, but 40% was through activities that were organized, like trips, like evenings, all sorts of things in order to get these revenues. But we're not eliminating the possibility of a membership, but they really stated very quite clearly, we have 650 members. Yeah, members, but non-paying members. Okay, thank you. Your report was really interesting. We have a lot of material for our staff. And I think one of our challenges is going to be make sure that we continue to move forward without leaving anybody behind. We have organizations that exist that have served our seniors in the past, and they have added a lot of value, and they have a lot of acquired knowledge, and we want to be able to benefit from it. And for staff, the next step, I think that's how we can use this document that we have and the resources that we have in order to accomplish this. Thank you. Thank you. I don't see anybody else. Questions from the public, perhaps? Thank you for allowing questions. Well, it's already been asked, but I saw this as a Golden Age Club, but new and improved. But you said the Golden Age Club, the Rotary Club at the Uni Center, isn't there an intergenerational center? I don't know how it's used. Are there supposed to be cultural activities, and there's a kitchen, and I don't consider myself in the golden age, but I am 50 or over. Maybe I am going to start considering myself a senior. But the geriatric center on Champlain Street that's going to open soon, these are all exist. Are they going to be assessed so that we don't get rid of anything or not take into account? Well, yeah, there's a lot of people to talk to, a lot of discussions to be had. This is just a beginning, but we understand you for the age of the Golden Age Club. There's a problem of engagement. The population is not engaged. So I think we're going to have to see with them what they want to do, if they want to stay where they are, if they want to change their programming. I mean, there's a number of different conversations we're going to have, but it's a starting point. And yeah, it's going to be work for us. Thank you. And thank you for all of this information. Great job. Yeah, don't give up. And now we're going to move on to a presentation on the evolution of the urban form and conflicts, typological conflicts. Alexandre Girard, and who is Director of Long-Term, Short-Term Planning of all planning. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you all And thank you for giving me the opportunity to present this evening. We've been thinking about this for quite some time already at our department, and we'd had presentations in the past to talk about new trends, new development trends. I think in 2020, 2021, we had presented new trends in development to you already. Today is to contribute, to add to those presentations, but also to follow up on the question that had been asked specifically by Councillor Louboudier, asking us to look at the buffer zones more specifically. So in the presentation, we are going to present a number of elements in that sense, but if not before the end. So the presentation is divided into two. The first part, we're going to talk about the evolution of the urban form and to put council to explain what's happening in Dieppe. I'm going to go back in 1960. And then in the second part, we're going to look at the conflicts of types. And when we talk about types of dwellings, I'm talking about the type of home, single family homes, semi-detached, row houses. These are all different types of homes, of dwellings, but the more formal word is typology.
So before going too far, I would like to draw attention to the work done by Maxime. He can't be here tonight, but he has a newborn at home, so I think that's a valid excuse. So going back to the 1960s, the slide here illustrates the built kind of what was built in the city. So the actual physical construction structures that were on the land. And we showed you it. We also show the kind of the main roads, so Champlain, Gauvin, Amiraux, and Dieppe Boulevard as well. But in 1960, that boulevard wasn't there, but we just kind of wanted to give you a reference point. So as we can see, so Dieppe in 1960, there was a population of $4,000, and the main type of building was single-family dwellings. And they were mainly along the main roads, and there were a few little clusters near the airport as well. But mainly, it was a village, mainly, or a town. 1980, the population had doubled to 8,500 people. And so you can see Champlain Place here. There was also development taking place of specific neighborhoods, so Beau Séjour along Chartersville. But it was basically the same type of dwelling, so single-family dwellings. That was the main type of structure at the time in Dieppe. In 2000, again, we've doubled the population again. And here we're seeing some densification with infill development. And then we come back to buildings near services, so Champlain Place. So again, the predominant type of house is a single-family dwelling. 2023, again, we've doubled the population in over a 20-year period. And you'll see that, again, the main type of dwelling within the municipality is still single-family dwellings, but things are changing quickly. So we're starting to see more infill development. We're starting to see greenfield development. We're starting to lack land, and we're focused on developing the rest of the land that's So based on the 2021 census, we have 5,580 single-family dwellings in the city. So about 50% of the dwellings. We have semi-detached family dwellings, 2,285. Townhouses, there are 855 of them. And then multifamily dwellings as well, 2,475. So in this slide, the purpose of this slide is to show kind of the evolution and the trends, the development trends. So the type of building permits that we receive within the department. So under the former bylaw, up until 2008, the typical type of house that was developed was single-family homes. So with the arrival of the new bylaw, Z8 in 2008, there was a redevelopment of zoning, which allowed more densification in certain areas of the municipality. And that's where we start to see the presence of semi-detached dwellings within the municipality. And then there was a 2015 where the bylaw was completely changed. And then from now, during that period, the trend that we saw was a rapid acceleration of development of townhouses and multifamily dwellings. So certain changes were made to the zoning bylaw in 2021 to block certain forms of development that we saw as being potential problems. So especially developments on private access lots. So we wanted to block that type of development, and they had to be debate within in council to approve those kinds of projects. But from 2021 to present, we're really seeing a rapid acceleration of requests for permits for multifamily dwellings and townhouses, and we're seeing that. You know, if you go along Dieppe Boulevard, Gauvin, downtown, there's a strong tendency towards multifamily dwellings. So here what we see is the number of dwellings that have been created since 2019. So we just went back 5 years, and the purpose is to show how quickly multi-family dwellings have developed. So from 2009, we went from 312, 180 multifamily dwellings in 2019, and now we're at 519 in 2023. And those projects account for the vast majority of building in the municipality. And so we have to really think about land development and how we adapt to this new context. And how do we manage those new trends? You know, these are private developers that are developing the municipality. The role of the municipality is to kind of govern or regulate development. So here's another slide showing that in the last 5 years, so we see the strong tendency towards multifamily dwellings. So again, this year and next year, if the trend continues, we'll continue to see that growth. In this map, we see in October 2023, there was roughly 1,100 housing units that were being built in Dieppe, and of that number, 865 were within 21 different buildings. And then of the 1,100 housing users, there was about 30 single-family dwellings. So if you go back to 1960 or even in 2000, when family dwellings were dominant, we've really changed. Things have really changed. Now it's the less, it's far less dominant. And that's a trend that has continued. So which brings us to the second part of my presentation. Now, I don't know if there are questions before we get into the second part of the presentation, or should I just start right away? What does the council want? I don't see any lights on, so let's continue. Oh, there's a question. Okay, go ahead. Councillor Godbout. Thank you. You know, I think we had looked at this when the census came out, and one of the questions that I had at the time was, as an urban planner, is there a ratio that we're looking for? You know, you're talking about a shift in tendencies or trends in the type of residents, but as a planner and the vision that we had for the city in the past and for the future, what's the ideal ratio, you know, to maintain quality of life and, you know, ratio, the number of trees and so forth, other services that we want to be able to offer, you know, in terms of trails and that. What could that ratio look like? And, you know, I'm not asking you to commit to that, but do you have a kind of an idea in mind? Pardon? That we're looking for, a type of ratio that we're looking for? Well, that's a good question. I think, you know, as urban developers, we're not looking for, you know, specific ratios. What we're looking for more is to develop regulatory tools to regulate development. And what's difficult in the long term is, you know, when we establish regulations and we decide to change them. You know, people who do development in our communities are private investors, and private investors, their decisions are based on current conditions, you know, the current bylaw and current regulations. But when the regulation changes, it changes, or it causes uncertainty, and it can cause conflicts, financial conflicts as well. So any changes made to our bylaw that we want to consider to rebalance the market, if you will, we have to really seriously think about the impact that it'll have on investors and on the public as well. So to get back to your question, you know, we don't really use ratios or specific ratio. It's we focus more on the vision of the municipality, and we look to adapt the zoning to the needs of the city. All right. Well, so if you see that there are changes that are happening in development, or if you want to send a messenger to developers, a message rather, we use the zoning bylaw to send messages to developers so that they can, yes, absolutely. Any change that we propose, or any reflection on bylaw, we have to really look at things on a case-by-case basis, and to consider the impact on stakeholders. So, you know, we have to take into account the general public interest, but we also have to think of the needs of the municipality, of developers, and people living in the community as well. We have to find a balance. And so we make proposals, and ultimately it's up to the council to make the difficult decisions. And you'll see this in the second part of my presentation. You know, we've made some observations, you know, but there is no silver bullet, really, to deal with all the problems that exist. You know, densification creates great opportunities for the municipality, but it also creates serious challenges as well for the municipality and for residents. So we have to consider all those angles. So does that answer your question? Yeah, good, thank you. Councillor Leboutier. Thank you, Councillor Godbout. That was exactly what I was going to be asking as well. I'd also kind of on the same, in the same vein, there's also a trend where, we're seeing a density, and that's what we were looking for in Dieppe. We have that density now, but now, for the next 5 to 10 years with what's coming down the pipe, do we have the capacity to, with the flow of vehicles, for example, that'll be traveling? So what are we going to do with that? Are we looking at that, the challenges? Well, I don't want to kind of get into the second part of my presentation yet, but there are analytical tools and planning tools that we want to, and this has already been authorized by council. So the development strategy, for example, the development of a secondary plan for the Dieppe Boulevard extension, and also reviewing all of the zoning bylaw and the municipal plan. Those are all important steps to allow us to look at things in detail and to make sustainable decisions, so that we can act in compliance with the city's vision. So we really want to do a good job of this, and we don't want to miss opportunities. But so I'm going to start with the second part of the presentation, and then there will certainly be other questions after that. So ultimately, the problem that we're looking at is very well illustrated. We're talking about bigger buildings, multifamily dwellings. I don't know, let's say, 12 or so units in each. That's just beside us, that's right beside a single family dwelling. So now, depending on where you are in Canada or internationally, that's an acceptable thing, but in other areas, it's not acceptable. So urban planning, really has to take into account the context. We have to look at the problem. So we see 4 factors. So the urban forms, and when we talk about urban forms, what that means is, what is there already? What is the form of or what's the shape of the parcels of land? Sometimes some buildings will be hidden behind others, and that'll create weird development. So zoning as well. What's the history of the zoning of a piece of property? So a property might have had zoning that allowed it to create multi-family dwelling for 30 years, but the land was vacant for 30 years, and then the next day, that person wants to exercise that right, and they come and ask for a permit and to build a multifamily dwelling. So that right always existed, but what people have been seeing for 30 years is a vacant piece of land. The zoning permitted that use, but that's what wasn't seen. So that's something that we have to take into consideration. The evolution or the change of the built environment. People are used to, living in a multifamily setting, but when things change, you have to adapt, and we have to properly communicate our plans. And then tools, our tools, our essential tool is our zoning bylaw. So we talk about height, permissible height of buildings, of structures, the number of structures permitted on a site, tree planting. So here what we see is a map that lists all the properties or all the zones that in the city. And all these zones permit residential uses. So all these zones, some of the zones, permit a mix of businesses and residential, but all these zones have a residential component to them. So R1, R2, RHM, R3, R4, we'll see what each zone permits so that we provide a bit more context. When we're talking about types of home, in certain zones, certain types of buildings are permitted. So RMN is mainly mini homes. Zone R2 is mainly single family dwellings. R2, that's when family dwellings and semi-detached dwellings and multifamily dwellings are permitted. RHM there are townhouses are included in that. R3 allows the whole range of types of buildings. And then zone 4, R4, allows only townhouses and multifamily dwellings. So if we want, the point is to increase density. In this drawing here, what you see is the built environment. So the visual representation of a typical neighborhood that's zoned R1 or R2. So there are some single family dwellings, there's some 2-floor buildings. So it's not very urban. People get used to that type of setup. And then the form in zone RHM and R3, we can see different types of buildings. So we can see what's all permitted here. So if you take the single family dwelling that you see in orange there, and so you say if a vacant piece of land is sold and then a multi-family dwelling is built, it can be a shock for residents. People can say, well, listen, I thought I lived in an area where it was just single family dwellings. But so again, the question of zoning plays a role in the structures that are allowed in a. And so what we've observed, what we've been seeing, and we've been seeing this for quite some time now, is there's a lot of zoning. So R3 zoning in Dieppe to allow a certain amount of flexibility for developers to build either single family dwellings and then with densification. So if we went back to 2008 and 2015, when the main type of buildings being built were single family dwellings, what happened is that developers were, built single family dwellings on land that was zoned R3 because the trend at that time, the demand at that time was for single family dwellings. But things quickly changed after the pandemic. So after 2021, the trend was more towards townhouses and multifamily dwellings, despite the fact that, it's single family dwellings are still allowed, but developers have tended towards the other type of buildings. And so is it a question of demographic change or population rather? Or is it a preference for apartment buildings? Or, I don't necessarily know the answer to that question, but, maybe with the aging of the population as well, that could explain part of the trend. Or it might be more up to the developers to explain, why they're building more townhouses and multifamily dwellings. And maybe that they're the people we have to ask. So this map shows kind of what I was talking about. So the construction of single family dwellings in zones that allow for stronger medium or strong density. So those are indicated. So in red, you see single family dwellings that are within an RHM zone or R3. So you're technically, your neighbor could build a multifamily dwelling. So this has been around since at least 2008. Now we think about this, we kind of reflect on this map periodically, but removing those rights would be very complicated. So in so it's a complicated situation. So in this map, what we see is the residential territory, and we see zones of low density and zones of high density. So you can see there can be conflicts, the typological conflicts in those zones. So if you have a single family dwelling that's adjacent to an R3 or an RHM zone, that can create conflicts. Even if a land is vacant, if it's been zoned R3 and RHM for several years, now we're in a period of development where that vacant land becomes interesting for developers. So these are what you could call these hot spots or potential conflict zones. So if there is development in those areas, we can anticipate a certain level of dissatisfaction among residents. So what are the tools and that are at our disposal? Well, okay, so the zoning bylaw controls the height of buildings, the setback of buildings, the size of buffer zones. We control the location of parking. So we have a lot of control mechanisms in terms of planning when we're looking at a site. So in this image, we see a setback of 10 meters for a multifamily dwelling. That's over 10 meters in height. So if you're higher than 10 meter, you have to be 10 meters away from the property line and so forth. It changes depending on the height of the building. So all of those elements, it's a question of what's acceptable socially. What's the ideal distance of a multifamily dwelling from a property line? Should it be 15 meters, 25 meters, 8 meters? That's where the question is asked. And we don't necessarily have the silver bullet or the magical solution to that, but that's something that the council has to debate. Other tools that I've already talked about, okay, so the maximum height of the building, the coefficient of the land coefficient, minimal distance for front yards, backyards, and side yards. So one solution that we could suggest, or that we might suggest rather, that we can suggest to council, and what we're talking about today is just for discussion purposes. If we went further, we'd have to really look at the real impact to understand the impact on developers. But one solution might be to eliminate single-family dwellings within in the R3 zone. So in the future, we could block future or prevent future conflicts. So this creates a problem that when you buy a house, you talk to lawyers and you talk to real estate agents, but the question of zoning is not necessarily taken into consideration or even part of the decision at all. So in our view, this could be a solution. To define a housing typology as a transition typology. So if you see, so not allowing multifamily dwellings in a single family dwelling zone, we could think of like a transition phase, if you will. Another thing is we could change the setback distance to 15 meters. So then the question is, what do we do with the 5 meters that we'll be losing? So maybe we could put parking there. Maybe we could put parking that's closer to the property line? So these are all questions that we have to kind of, that are worth debating at the community level. We could look at implementing, when you have a certain height of building, you could look at setbacks to reduce the impact of the mass of the building on single family dwellings. So it can be quite a big impact depending on the size of the building. And that could reduce the burden of that type of development when it's close to a single family dwelling. Here, we could maybe put buildings closer to the street. So force buildings to be as close as possible to the street, to place the building further away from other properties around it. So here we see there's quite a good buffer zone, and there's a parking lot as well that separates the building from the dwellings that are just behind it. So again, I think it's worth mentioning that the question of densifying or densification, it's not just Dieppe that's thinking about this. This is being thought about across Canada. It's not necessarily a crisis, but it's a problem, a housing process, a problem as much in Dieppe as it is in the rest of Canada. So multifamily dwellings and townhouses play an important role in the creation of buildings for people, but if we remove a certain number of opportunities to development or to developers to densify the city, we could have an impact on the creation of dwellings. So that's why it's important to study every intervention measure that we choose. When we're thinking of we have to look at what's best for Dieppe. So this is what we're proposing, and we can imagine a whole suite of efforts and measures that we could take, but each measure will have to be studied in depth so that we can think of the potential impact. So we have to really evaluate the impact of each.
Ici, on suggère, c'est de prendre l'opportunité de regarder à certains principes à l'intérieur de l'élaboration de la stratégie de croissance urbaine, de regarder à certaines pistes de solutions qui pourraient être instaurées, et aussi avec le plan secondaire, de regarder au territoire de l'extension du boulevard Dieppe, où est-ce qu'il serait plus facile d'instaurer des mesures plus innovatrices, plus à jour, si on veut, dans un contexte où est-ce qu'il n'y a pas nécessairement des droits acquis, ou pas nécessairement des droits acquis, mais des instances où est-ce que les développeurs ont fait des investissements substantiels pensant qu'ils pouvaient développer d'une certaine manière. Donc, l'autre élément, donc là, ici, on parle de 2024, 2025. Un peu plus à moyen terme, on parle vraiment d'une révision totale de l'arrêté de zonage. On parle aussi d'une révision totale de notre plan municipal, puis de vraiment regarder précisément quel genre de municipalité qu'on veut en termes de forme urbaine, en termes d'aménagement du territoire. Donc, j'ai parlé quand même assez longtemps. Je vous lance la question, je vous lance la parole.
Tu ne seras pas surpris qu'il y ait des questions.
Oui.
Monsieur Lantaigne.
Merci, Monsieur le maire. Merci beaucoup, Alexandre, pour cette présentation tant attendue. Ça fait déjà un bout de qu'on en parle. Puis, je comprends que c'est beaucoup de travail. Merci de nous entendre et de nous écouter.
Thank you for listening to us, and thank you for your presentation. And we, as councillor, we listen to our citizens and their concerns. And there's been some big changes over the last 3 years in terms of the multi-family dwellings. They're being built very quickly. Growth is very quickly. It's a whole challenge to manage growth, and not just in Dieppe, as you said, it's everywhere. So I have some questions. I mean, you've answered them partially, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but seeing as we're in the subject, or is the million-dollar question, what would you respond to a resident who says, well, there are just too many apartment buildings here in Dieppe? There's just too many. Now I have my answers, my way of thinking, but I'd like to hear you on that. We were talking about ratios earlier with this for a city like ours, with climate change, densification, and everything that we see current trends. Is it good? Is it exaggerated? Is it logical? That's a question that's difficult to answer. Well, for me, at the end of the day, what's important is to look at the development that we're planning, what we're expecting have been have been planned. So when we adopt a zoning bylaw or a municipal plan, we give each property a certain zone. We give it a certain zone number, which allows a certain type of development. So most of the development that is done is a part of that long-term planning. I mean, the zoning was determined back in 1996, 2008, 2015. So at the end of the day, are we saying, are there too many apartment buildings? Or this, the same question could be turned around. Are there too many single-family homes in Dieppe? So when we talk about creating housing, well, as a planner, for me, I think we have to consider that there is a real need for housing. There is a population growth that hadn't been planned for at the national level. This population growth is not natural, if you will. It comes from international immigration. So you could ask any town planner, any city planners from across the country, and nobody would was going had anticipated that we'd be welcoming 1.2 million immigrants here in Canada, and that Dieppe grew by 2,000 people in 2022 and 2023, and we're expecting the same growth in this year. If we receive 2,000 persons in Dieppe, we need to engage our developers. We have to house these people. And at this point, the market seems to dictate that multifamily dwellings are what are being needed. And we have to, we have to see our capacity in order to meet the objectives of the population growth. I don't know if I answered your question. No. Well, no, it's not a question that's easy to answer in any case, but it's just at the same time, without wanting to repeat everything or to repeat what you said, some people say that there's a lack of planning, that these apartment buildings are going up a little bit everywhere without having been planned. But I think you explained it correctly. The zoning is in place, and if it's respected, I was going to say in most cases, but no, in all cases, in fact. Yes, absolutely. We don't allow building permits without it being authorized and part of the zoning bylaw. Yes, and I know it might take time, and we can't do it overnight, but what would be nice, I know it's a lot of work and it's been taken a long time, but my last question, and why I think we know the answer, as you said earlier, somebody who had a property 30 years ago and doesn't have a project, nothing's been done, and they're in a certain zone now that allows certain things. To what point do we have the power or the possibility to say, well, no, this property, this part of the city, we don't want to see any apartment buildings in this area anymore. We don't want to see any more businesses. How, to what point do we have the power to change the zoning? Whereas, as you mentioned, somebody invested money, a lot of money last year, and might come up with a project, but then all of a sudden we change the rules of the game. Well, the easy answer is that council has has the last word. So if council so wishes, if they want to change the zoning of a property, of course, you can do so. As a recommendation, I would recommend it after a very comprehensive study in order to establish the vision for council, and that this change of zoning would be done within this vision and that before being adopted by council. But legally speaking, what would it mean? Well, legally speaking, of course, I'm not a lawyer, but you'd have to ask a legal person or a lawyer. So for me, as we amend the zoning map, the ultimate decision is council's. If it's something that can be done through a complete review of the zoning bylaws and the municipal plan where we establish a clear and precise vision, and then if modifying this vision, well, if it's the wish of council, well, it would be acceptable, I think. But to just look at one property specifically, well, we'd have to do further research on that. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So sorry for the difficult questions. Well, that's why we're here. Thank you. Councillor Thibodeau, thank you. I wanted to talk, you talked about the typology of dwellings, but my question is from a different angle. As you know, we are in a period of inflation. Taxes, property taxes have gone up a lot, as we saw earlier this evening. And we'd like to welcome a greater number of immigrants, of young families. But quite often, housing is not affordable for them. Are the developers ready to work with the municipality to build more affordable housing? Have we looked for grants that exist from the federal government to help developers to do so? Another question I have is, should we act to force developers to build a certain percentage? If they build a block, an apartment building, should a certain percentage of them be affordable housing? Should we do something in that sense? Well, to answer your last question, yes, it's possible. There are mechanisms in the Community Planning Act that allows it when we talk about inclusive zoning zones. It's been looked at provincially, and it doesn't seem that because of the scale of the projects that we see in the greater Dieppe area and surrounding area, and the same thing with Fredericton, St. John, to take this inclusive approach, forcing a certain percentage wouldn't necessarily be the best practice, but rather work through incentives or with bonus density zoning. So once again, it's an issue of giving an incentive, a bonus to increase the density of a certain site in exchange for this community good, this community asset, and creating affordable housing. It brings us back to the initial problem in that how do we put the denser sectors along with the low density sectors together? How do they fit in one with another? So it's a question of, it's very difficult to find an approach that is good for the developers and for the existing residents. So for your question, yes, the answer is yes, it exists, but the mechanisms that are the best approach currently, it would seem that the municipalities would prefer to give incentives rather to help to build affordable housing. And in our case, we give incentives to a developer that is a part of a provincial federal program that is accepted by Canada Mortgage and Housing, CMHC, or we'll give incentives or even eliminate eliminate the price of the building permit. And your first question, I'm sorry, could you repeat it? I've forgotten what it was. Are developers ready to work with the municipality to build affordable housing units? And have we gone looking for all of the grants that we might be able to get for either for incentives or, and did we receive funding? Well, at this point, the Housing Accelerator Fund, actually, we haven't received the funding yet. We had applied. We had 7 actions listed, and unfortunately, we were not accepted for that, for this application. So there were 170 municipalities received funding out of 500 applicants. So yes, certain developers are ready to work with a municipality, but quite often they depend on CMHC or provincial funding. So we have to continue as a municipality. We have to continue to inform them of the existence of this type of project, to help them navigate through these programs that are sometimes very complicated. And so we'd like to develop a certain expertise to guide them through the application process for the funding that is available for housing. Now, one thing that came out from our housing needs study done last year and that we're working on right now in our housing strategy is the issue of engaging the not-for-profits in housing, for housing creation. There seems to be a national trend currently to direct public funding to the not-for-profits, such as co-ops and people who can build housing, but without making a profit, without looking for profits. So there's possible opportunities there if we want to increase our incentives, for example, we could turn to those type of organizations, not-for-profits. Thank you. Thank you for answering my question. And I have a comment. I'm very happy that we finally addressed the issue of these buffer zones and that we're going to start thinking about that and that we're going to hear proposals for that. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Godet. Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a comment. I've been here for about 38 years here in Dieppe, and I hear people speak and the neighbors and the developers are going to develop. They're going to build what they can sell or what they can rent. I mean, that's what they do. And we talk about density. I understand that you can put, more people in a smaller space in higher density. But at the end of the day, what do we want Dieppe to look like in 15, 20 years? We want to be able to go to work. And I was looking at page 91, and I know that this is just recommendations. Page 91. Oh, well, I have 91 here, it says, but it's on possible interventions for R3 zone. So I know at some point in Dieppe, we're not going to be able to build homes, individual homes. We're going to build row homes and townhouses, and people who want to come live to Dieppe. I mean, I'm just wondering what it's going to look like in 15 or 20 years. If is this what we want? Well, but we're talking about planting trees but with that density, there's not going to be a lot of room to plant trees, and the city will grow even faster. And it's just that, I mean, I'm not against development at all, but when you think about it, when you think of roads and the traffic and what is it going to look like with all of this development? And we have to look at that. Yes. Yeah, that's very good comment. Yes. The idea here was to eliminate single family homes within these sectors that are in red on this map in front of you. So it's not it's question of eliminating single family homes in all zones, just the ones that are R3 where there are conflicts currently between single family homes and the multifamily dwellings that will probably continue to grow. Yeah, oh, I understand that. It's just the whole issue of our parks as well. And are we going to be able to take a walk in the park or bike? There's going to be a lot more people. And, you know, so a lot more people. We just have to think about this. It's something that we have to think for the next 15, 20 years. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Jeanne. I don't want to belabor the point because I think we've gone through everything, but I want to add to what Councillor Thibodeau just said on inclusive zoning. And is it possible to have a zoning for non-market types like co-ops, perhaps get more information? What to see what the possibility is that we can do something for housing that is too expensive. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for having explained the conflicts, the zones where there are conflicts between typologies. And thank you for proposing solutions that make sense. If I look at this, the solutions in greater depth, I'm happy. I'm eager to do that together. Actually, to look at it in greater depth. Yeah, well, we are going to be tabling a housing strategy over the next few months to see how to engage the not-for-profits to make sure they're a part of the strategy and our role as a service. We're going to develop an action plan to make sure that we are as efficient as possible to get more housing units developed, both from the nonprofit sector as from the other side of the coin. Once again, I'm going to repeat, the population growth strategy is going to be a very important document for the municipality because that's where we're going to look to the future. We're going to talk about population projections, projections for job-wise, and what the municipality will look like based on the scenario we choose in 2040. So we're going to project 15 years in the future, and we've assessed that there are 10,000 dwelling units that might come over the next few years. So these are all elements to think about. Council will have to take them into consideration, especially as it develops the population growth strategy. Thank you. If you allow me to add the along with the not-for-profits expansion, Dieppe is working on this issue as well, and they're going to come up with some opportunities for us to consider as well. Thank you. Councillor Leboutier. Thank you. My question, well, when we talked about buffer zones, and it's only been since I've been here, and what has it been, 6 years here on council? So the challenge that we've had sometimes with the residents, whether we take Centrale or another street, it's usually the problem is with the R3 and the RHM zones, which are pretty new. I mean, they were voted on. It was changed when? Well, there were certain amendments, but yeah, there were changes, and we changed to institutional zone to RHM or R3. Not us, but we were asked to change certain zones. In these intervention zones, these focus areas, and once again, you are the experts, not us, but when we look in the territories that are not yet established, a developer comes up and starts building single-family homes. And this property that we've approved, I mean, they have the right to do so, but in that zone, in that development, can we come up and freeze the plan? I mean, if it's single family dwellings and then all of a sudden they decide, no, I'm going to sell the rest and you can build your apartment buildings, or, I mean, that's the challenge with these buffer zones between these two things. And I was, yeah, I mean, there's some great alternatives, but I'm just wondering if you considered this possibility. Well, on the issue of freezing a development, well, it's in the zoning bylaw how the property is zoned. If it's a property is zoned R1, well, it's one single family dwelling. So that guarantees that that the whole neighborhood is going to remain single family dwellings. Now, if we start allowing R3 or RHM zones, because as we showed on the slide, we could build either single family or semi-detached or row homes or multifamily all in the same zone. At this point in the zoning bylaw, there's nothing from preventing a developer to build 20 single family homes and then on the next lot to build a multifamily dwelling. I mean, there are provisions that mention that the multifamily dwelling has to be a certain distance from the property line, and that distance is greater to the distance of a single family home from the property line. But we have no mechanism at this point to oblige him to finish a street using the same type of housing he started with. Well, that was exactly my question. Is there a way to define that? But looking at what's being done elsewhere to limit that kind of situation. Well, I'll take note. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Who's left? Councillor Godbout. Thank you. Just a couple of brief questions. It's excellent presentation, like always. We really appreciate them. And it's reflected in the fact that we want to talk to you about it, continue talking to you about that. Now, I looked at the other possible interventions, especially in terms of multifamily dwellings. In these circumstances, can we also continue to impose greater green spaces, more green spaces on these multifamily dwellings? And we've seen it in presentations before council recently, and council and comments that we hear from residents. It's a question of quality of life. What is the quality of life here in Dieppe? How are we going to make sure that people who move into these multifamily dwellings will also benefit from the quality of life that have the people who live in single family or semi-detached homes? So, and one of the answers for me is more green spaces around these buildings. Is that something that we could add to the buffer zone or to another bylaw? Well, yes, as I mentioned, all of these tools that we have available, well, we can play with the setbacks, we can require greater buffer zone, we could require, well, if you look at this image, for example, we could technically use this model and start drafting performance criteria, for example. But if it's the wish of, if you want all future multifamily dwellings to have this type, yeah, we could discriminate based on the types of building. Yeah, absolutely. It's just a question of understanding the impact it would have. And also, can we also discriminate or distinguish rather than discriminate between a single family that has a greater number of bedrooms for larger families, like a 3-bedroom rather than a 2-bedroom? Can we impose that type of criteria on a developer, or rather than multifamily that are family and not just small families? Well, that's not something we've seen very frequently in New Brunswick, and I have no references within a zoning bylaw where we would insist on a type of development that stipulates that it has to be 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom. I think that might fill a certain need, something we can look at. We can come back to you, even see if the Community Planning Act would allow us to include that in a zoning bylaw. But it's not the first time we hear the question. And the last scenario, are we going to look at the number of floors, number of stories, the height limit that we want? Would it be preferable to have a number of different multifamily units over a greater surface area, or a smaller number but higher? What is more beneficial for the community? Can we look at that too? Absolutely. It would be another focus area, another intervention that could be taken into consideration. The question of height, not only the height, but the form, the structure, the size of the structure, the length of the frontage, for example, the length of the facade. You look at a building that's 150 meters long, but only 4 stories. It's quite imposing compared to one that's 20 meters with 5 stories. Is not as imposing physically. Might be higher, but it doesn't impress as much. So we could look at that, sure, as well. Thank you.
Madame Turgeon.
Thank you, Councillor Turgeon-Roy. Thank you. Well, I'm not going to repeat everything, but I think I notice that there's been a lot of interest in this issue, and thank you for your presentation, because sometimes it's things that I wasn't able to explain. It's not that I didn't understand, but now I'm much better able to explain. Well, there are great opportunities. First of all, the municipal plan review and also the zoning plan review. How did you call it? Yeah, and then the urban growth strategy. This is the hot topic, or at least since we've been voted in as a council, we talk about it almost every week, every day. And so I think it's worthwhile to look at the vision. Where do we want to go with all of this? And as you said, it's council that is going to decide all of this. I think we have some great opportunities coming up. I sincerely hope that we'll have the opportunity to discuss it, to look at it, and determine what our vision is, to talk to our residents. And I think we know what people want. We need to know what people want, where they want the municipality to go. That's all I wanted to say. In terms of the growth strategy, how is that going to be presented? Will that be presented in a public council meeting?
Avec la stratégie de croissance urbaine.
The objective here with the urban strategy, growth strategy, is to engage both city staff, council members, and also residents. So we want to have consultation sessions with residents. And I'm going to repeat myself again here. This is the opportunity for residents to come in and share their feedback on the vision of the municipality. So, you know, there might be a less opportunity in a rezoning process, but this opportunity here would be a great opportunity that we'll be offering residents to come to share their feedback. All right, thank you. All right, well, to end this discussion, you know, I went through 2 periods of rezoning in the municipality, and all I can say is put your seatbelts on. All right, sorry, I think we still have one last presentation. I was going to end the meeting, but we have one last presentation. Okay, please go to the mic. So listen, I live on Conservation Street. Everybody has trees. It was really well developed. I don't think developers lost money. Could we require that, like, they can't just cut trees? Oh, you're going to like the next presentation in that case, because that's what we're talking about. Okay, well, secondly then, what strikes me, you know, I lived in Quebec City, I've lived in a number of places, but in Dieppe, it's not a pedestrian city. Everything, you know, we keep building buildings, but people have to have a car. You know, it would be nice to have kind of a neighborhood feel like we have in bigger cities, but you know, we have a lot of cars, so I'm just wondering. Okay, well, clear cutting and trees, you know, the tree bylaw that my colleague Alexandre he might want to comment on that, but in terms of creating areas that are more focused on pedestrian traffic, you know, there are areas where we want to do this and that, like this downtown core, for example, and the upper city as well, you know, where there are grocery stores, the IGA. We're, you know, we're looking at areas where we can foster more foot traffic. And then, you know, as we develop Dieppe Boulevard, you know, in the long term with the infrastructure that was set up in terms of cycling trails and sidewalks, you know, that's our vision, is to have a boulevard that's dynamic and where people feel comfortable to, you know, to travel by bike. And inaudible comment. The inaudible comment, the interpreter cannot hear the speaker. Microphone, please. You know, in the process, in the zoning change process that will be undertaken, there will be discussions with residents as well to get feedback. You know, we want to hear their vision for the city. You know, the city, in recent years, we spent a lot of time on you know, the whole question of having more green space, but also cycling trails and walking trails, and you know, there's also the idea of tree conservation, and we're the only city in Atlantic Canada that has a tree bylaw that regulates the cutting of trees. So we're the only city in the Atlantic region. No, and it applies to developers and individuals. The interpreter cannot hear the speaker. 2023, last year. Can I ask a question before you go to the next process? I had a question and an observation. So Dieppe, the land that needs to be developed belongs mainly to investors and developers. In the development principles, you know, in the principles, is there thought of, you know, is there talk about increasing the control that the city has over the use and the purchase of land for conservation? Are there any guiding principles in that regard? You know, once zoning bylaws are in place, I mean, they tend to favor developers, and they're kind of set. But that's a question, is there a principle that exists? Has this been discussed in the past? So yes, it does exist. All development has to set aside a certain percentage of green space. And in the recreation plan as well, the master recreation plan, there's also an effort to acquire land for conservation. So we're currently doing research and looking at the opportunities that will be coming up. So that principle does exist. So you're looking to buy land from individuals? Well, we're looking at individuals or opportunities rather. Okay, but there's no set rule or ratio or nothing that's clearly defined. There hasn't been more thought given to that. Well, maybe Ms. Spencer can add to. Thank you, Your Worship. Well, that's one of the things that we're looking at with our new environment department. So zones where there would be zones of interest or zones that have ecological importance, perhaps the city could look to buy that land. And there also are world targets, I think 30 or so percent, and that's being looked at. So those are things that we're studying. And you know, in terms of densification, I also wanted to add that allows us to pay for our infrastructure. Now it has to be done well. And one of the solutions for, you know, to the increased traffic is a greater use of public transit. And that's, Well, we have to respect our financial obligations. Okay, well, one last comment then. You know, it was mentioned that, you know, when land is zoned, say R1, automatically we can expect that it'll remain R1 and then that the zoning won't change. But there are many examples in Dieppe over the years where, you know, we had a single family dwelling on a land zoned R1. The land was sold. The buyer requested a zoning change to R3. And then this is changing the face of Dieppe in established neighborhoods. So I think one of the things that we need to do to avoid conflict is to stop giving gifts to developers in terms of you know, allowing them to change zoning in areas that are already established and where I think that's something we have to think about. And we have lots of examples in Dieppe of that type of situation. All right, just to address the rezoning process, you know, it's important to say that you know, city employees or council don't have any control over zoning requests. The legislation requires that if we receive a request from a developer, we process it, we present it to council, it's debated publicly, and ultimately the decision is up to council. So, you know, it's not a given that we approve every request, but there is a legal process that we have to follow. All right, thank you. Let's continue. The other Alexandre, please. To speak about the lawn bylaw. Are we? Oh, well, are you going to go further than just trees? Well, I'm going to try to keep this short. I don't want to keep you here too late. Now, unfortunately, there will be technical terms as well. I'll try to explain them as best I can. So I'm here to talk about our proposed amendment to the lawn bylaw. We're going to soon be presenting an amendment to the bylaw, and we wanted to take the time to explain it and to help you reflect on it so that when the bylaw comes before you, you'll have enough information to make a decision. So first of all, you know, we saw this, that, you know, biodiversity is being lost in Dieppe, but also worldwide. There's more citizen movements trying to change municipal lawn bylaws. And this leads to conflict of interpretation and challenges in terms of enforcing the rules. Now, it seems to be an aesthetic issue that's not necessarily linked to safety or health. So municipalities that have been challenged in court have a tendency to lose, have been having a tendency to lose. And there's also the question of workload for our city employees who maintain grassy areas because it's the tradition to do so. So in the current bylaw, the maximum height is limited to 20 centimeters. So we often get calls from people when the grass goes higher than 20%. So at 21 centimeters, people start calling us. If neighbors are letting their lawn go, it creates a lot of stress for our municipal employees. In the current bylaw, there's talk of grass and lawn. Those two terms are vague and they can be difficult to interpret, and those can lead to challenges as well. We receive 200 to 300 complaints per summer for grass exceeding 20 centimeters. So that's requires a phenomenal use of resources. You know, we have to go and tell people, can you please cut your lawn, and explain the bylaw. And this can lead to fines if the work is not done. And as I said, we maintain many underused public spaces. So land that's not necessarily used for playing soccer or for running on, but that is contributing to the loss of biodiversity. So Councillor Godin asked about, if there was scientific data on the movement to promote the not cutting of lawns in the month of May to protect butterflies. There's been a bit of research done on this. So the first study that's been presented here dates back to 2022, and it discusses the influence or the impact of cutting grass less often. There's a positive impact. Everything that we see on the right, there's an improvement in the abundance and richness of insect life. And when we look at target groups, so like ticks and less desirable species, we saw a reduction of this population, whereas beneficial, there was an increase of a beneficial increase in other types of insects. There was another study that was a compilation of 14 studies, and it showed that that reduced mowing increased plant abundance and diversity. It increased insect abundance and diversity. It reduced pests or undesirable insects and plants. So it reduced the abundance or colonization of certain types of plants, including ones that cause allergies. There was also a reduction in ground temperature, and there was an increase in carbon sequestration. So often these are plants that have a deep root system and that create a richer soil that capture more carbon than a lawn that's mowed on a regular basis. Another interesting statistic: my cousin is a beekeeper, and he was saying that bees need 6 to 7 million flowers. So the more flowers they have, the more honey they produce, and the more biodiversity they have. So, and there are several thousand or 750 species of bees in Canada. In that same study, they looked at a scenario for reducing mowing frequency by 1/3. This took place in Trois-Rivières in Quebec, and they did not exclude sports fields because those fields have to be maintained, and they obtained 36% savings on their maintenance budget. So it's quite substantial. And they found that ragweed was less likely to colonize less Mo's sites, so fewer impacts on human health. More and more cities are starting to look at different ways of maintaining their grass. So it's called differentiated management. In this picture, we see Rosemont in Montreal. So in some places you cut the grass 1 year, and some other places it's once a week. So for example, in sports grounds. So a differentiated management of the grass. In London, Ontario, there were regulatory changes made in 2017, 2018, and 2023. And there was an effort to define naturalized areas versus turf grass. So the idea was, should there be different percentages of grass? And in 2025, they will be removing that regulation because it was too complicated, because city staff are not necessarily experts on these issues. So it became difficult to manage. So that brings us to what we're recommending. We are recommending revising or reviewing bylaw C35. We want to call it the bylaw on vegetative growth to include all plant forms. And instead of limiting, so we want to make the owner ensure that they don't obstruct traffic, that they remove noxious or toxic or dangerous plants, and we'll be able to document that. And we'll ask owners to comply with a fire prevention or environmental management directive. So if we see a situation where the grass is really overflowing, we'll be able to act. There will be a clause in the bylaw to allow us to do that. So basically, that's what we're suggesting. There are a number of benefits with what we're proposing. So we'll be less subject to legal challenge. We'll continue with our drive to innovate and become a more eco-responsible city. And in fact, we've set up a collaboration with the University of Moncton to test naturalized sites and their impact on insects. So we'll have a summer student that will be doing the inventory with us. And we're also working on other projects. We'll be looking at the advantages of different insects, and I'll explain how that project is going to unfold. Now, I've mentioned this already, but there are savings on city resources. So bylaw enforcement, parks, public works. So if we'll do tests, and if we can apply it at a larger scale, that might lead to operational advantages. It'll help us with the greenhouse gas reduction, and it may allow us to apply for a status as a monarch-friendly city. So we're looking at different measures that we can take to encourage monarch growth, which has been declared an endangered species. So risks now. So I talked about the fire department, communication. There will be issues, and I'll try to talk about them here. And so I'll look at the risks and then how we propose to mitigate it. So there will be resistance to change. People are still going to have to cut their lawns. There'll certainly be a number of people that will still want to maintain very manicured lawns. And we don't want to discourage that either. So we plan to do a communication exercise and public consultation. We want to create sites where undesirable species proliferate. And we'll take a look at that. In terms of public complaints now, if we, regardless of what we're going to receive complaints. So we're going to develop key messages so that you can respond to residents. Now, in terms of fire hazards, our approach is to focus on education and best practices. So we'll be working on that in our messaging with the communications department. And we're going to recommend maintenance near roads and buildings so that if there are cigarette butts, that could become a danger. And as I said, there will be special provisions in the bylaw if we see situations that could really be dangerous. It might be difficult to come back to regular lawns if we change our mind. So we don't want to create a shock among residents. We want to carefully select pilot sites. So we'll be explaining, and we'll be having displays on sites that explain what we're doing. In terms of managing hazardous and unsightly sites, we'll continue to enforce the law on unsafe or unsightly premises. There are certain criteria, and we'll continue to enforce those. And again, there's a possibility of issuing a directive if the situation is truly dangerous. And then finally, in terms of disturbance to traffic or visibility, we'll include in the bylaw the maintenance of traffic lanes, signs, and lighting. Now, in terms of the pilot project that we're working on with the University of Moncton, we'll be testing flowering plant seeding and assessing insect biodiversity on various sites. They'll be distributed around the city. We will also want to classify soil and above ground fauna. So the pollinators, pests, larvae, and other things. And I'm just going to, here's a quick picture of the sites that we're looking at. So along the trail near the aquatic center, we want to look at as well our water retention sites to look at what we can do with those. There are certain areas in parks, so Rotary Park, Lakeland Park, and others. So the objectives of this is to comply with jurisprudence. We don't want to open ourselves up to legal challenges. We want to promote nature-friendly developments and reintroduce biodiversity into the city. It's an opportunity for Dieppe to be a leader and to innovate, and we're hoping to reduce the workload of certain work teams as well. So the important dates. So March 18th, today, presentation to the Standing Committee. In April, we'll be presenting the bylaw. So you'll be able to debate it and tell us if it makes sense or if we have to go back to the drawing board. In May, our intention is to start the pilot project with the University of Moncton. And that's something we can do even if the bylaw hasn't been adopted. We can test things. And we've already adopted the Dandelion Madness initiative in May. In June, there'll be an issue of Dieppe Mag coming out that will provide information on what we're doing. And then there will be, so it's a communication campaign. In September, we'd like to come back to the public with a consultation, and the forum will be determined with the communication department. We want to get feedback from people, how they, what their experience was with the pilot project. Did people see problematic situations? And then in November, I don't want to make promises that are too ambitious, but we're hoping to present the results both on the public consultation and the project with the University of Moncton. That's all for me. Do you have any questions? Ms. Janet. Thank you, Your Worship. I sensed that I was going to be the first one, but all right. So first of all, congratulations. Thank you for the presentation. It's really, this is an opportunity for us to be, I can't think of a word right now, but kind of at the avant-garde. And bravo, for the studies that you cited as well, in terms of the impact on insects and plants. I'm very happy to see, that studies have proved that it decreased some of the negative, the proliferation of some negative insects like ticks and things like that, but it also increased other populations of positive insect populations. And also you mentioned the monarch population, and I think since last year, they're no longer a threatened, or their status has changed for the better. They're no longer an endangered species, but they're a threatened species. Now, in terms of a fire risk, that was a little bit less clear for me. In my view, the more biodiversity we have, the more humidity there is in the ground. So does that create a fire risk? Well, the issue is that it's a perception of risk. People think that it can cause a fire. So I should have specified that, but we have to educate people that no, as a matter of fact, wild native plants have a better resistance to fire. So they have they're less likely to catch fire. So we have to address that with the fire department. All right, my second question is, there's often a perception, or I don't know if it's a baseless theory or not, but that, there's, that dandelions cause pollen allergies. But my understanding is that the pollen that people are allergic to comes from trees. So did I cut? I took your question there. So are there studies that we can look at on you know, on the impact of dandelions and you know, is there, well, that'll be in our frequently asked questions section that we'll prepare for the public. Yeah, because my understanding was that that dandelions produce a heavy pollen that doesn't fly around. So there'll be messages published in the Dieppe mag, but will there be more information like pamphlets and on information on the website? So here are the best practices, for example, for maintaining your grass or your lawn. Yes, we'll put in place a communications plan. You know, that's why we're here today. We want to make sure that that we meet our deadline. If we want to publish something in the Dieppe mag, that there will be a change in the bylaw, you know, it has to go. If we want to publish it in the June issue, we have to approve it by April. So, and if council doesn't approve the new bylaw, then we'll adjust our plans. All right. I want to, Councillor Leboutier. Thank you. I want maybe to better understand this year that we're going to be doing a pilot project in the city. Now, are we looking at private property in the future? Well, the idea right now is to leave people that there won't be a maximum height of lawn anymore. If people want to develop a naturalized area, they'll be allowed to in what we're proposing as a bylaw. And for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, municipalities that have tried to define percentages or to say, okay, well, this is a neglected lawn, this is not, you know, they all came back to the drawing board and they were all challenged in court. So we have to create a permissive bylaw because that's what jurisprudence in Canada dictates. All right, so let's say along, you know, on the alongside a street, you know, usually there's grass and there's a sidewalk. Well, it'll be up to owners to manage that, and they'll have to make sure that the grass doesn't cover public signage or doesn't grow onto the roadway. So in terms of safety, we can specify that to say that the city has a duty but to say that it's 20 or 25 or 30 centimeters, that's an aesthetic judgment and it's not recognized in court. So even lawn that's like 50 centimeters high, well, that's what we're going to be proposing. After that, you can debate it and you can tell us whether it's acceptable or not.
And in terms of trails, if I'm on my bicycle and an animal jumps out at me and as a resident, is it going to be a challenge? What do other municipalities do? I mean, I think there are only 2 in Canada, right? That don't have any lawn height limits. Oh, there are more, but London is removing theirs, and no, there aren't very many. No. Okay, so we're going to look at safety. We're going to look at all of that to make sure that, you know, along the trails well, we are, as I mentioned, amongst best practices, along streets, we're going to keep a band mode along trails, along streets, based on the recommendations of the facility department. So the public trails are still going to be maintained. If we're going to let vegetation grow, it's more in the background areas where, you know, behind the ballparks, around the edges, the trails are still going to be maintained this year. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I don't see any other lights on. So I think I'm going to take this opportunity to adjourn the meeting. Have a great evening, all of you.